Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, we'll be going through two different free hit 33 drafts. For those of you that are on your free hit, hopefully this will be helpful, and even if not, I'm going to discuss players that I think we should be targeting. So hopefully you find some use with this regardless. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into today's video. So guys, I'm delighted to say that Ultimate Champions is officially live for everyone to play. The alpha is at least. You can get onto Ultimate Champions, start to play the game, build the best team you possibly can, trade those players on the market, open packs, etc. Super exciting. So the first link in the description will take you to Ultimate Champions. If you either just want to support the channel or play this super cool game, you can do both those things for free by clicking the link in the description. Basically, get onto the alpha, build your first initial draft. This is my initial draft, as you can see on the screen. I've not got fantastic knowledge of the championship, but I am gaining more and more knowledge, and it's exciting to sort of delve into that project. So I've built my initial team here, started to trade in the marketplace, opened a couple of packs as well. Really excited to get going with this so you guys can finally play the game as well. If you do download Ultimate Champions, of course, let me know what you think. It will support the channel. Super cool game. Thank you to Ultimate Champions for continuing to sponsor the videos, build those cool teams, and then send them to me over on Twitter. So today is going to be a much shorter video than usual. I'm just going to show you two drafts. The first draft is going to be what I think is the sensible draft where you optimize your team as much as possible. What I mean by that is you're picking the correct balance of single and double game week players. You're picking the players that if you were to plug your team into an algorithm, they would tell you that have the highest projected points. But you're also picking a few players that seem to be performing very well at the moment. So like I said, the first draft is basically me trying to build the perfect free hit team on paper. The second draft is slightly different, but it's one which I really like and I'm actually starting to lean towards. So there's two different drafts for you. As always, let me know down below. Are there any players that I've missed? Are there any players that you think I should be going for? Which of the two drafts do you prefer? Always interested to hear your comments down below. So this draft is sitting currently in a 3-4-3. I know there aren't that many good strikers, but I actually think for the free hit 33 at least, there are a few good ones to pick from. So therefore, we're in a 3-4-3. It's 104.7 million because that's my team value. But of course, I already own a couple of players. I don't own some of the players that you might already. So you might be able to either not afford this or quite easily afford it and be able to maybe upgrade the bench a little bit, just as an example. So there are sort of multiple options that you've got here. Starting off, I really do think that the Newcastle defence is definitely worth picking on the free hit. Now, I don't necessarily think Leicester at home is a fantastic fixture from a defensive perspective, and even to some extent Crystal Palace. Both of these teams can score goals. That being said, Leicester are obviously playing the second leg against PSV, could potentially go to 120 minutes. If it does, I would think that they're going to heavily rotate, and I think they'll probably heavily rotate regardless. And obviously don't have much rest time. And then Palace, we saw against Leicester in game week 32. They're not necessarily a free-flowing team sometimes. So I do see at least one clean sheet there. And to be honest, if Target and Dubravka between them can pick up maybe 8 points for Target, 9-10 points for Dubravka with save points and a clean sheet for each of them, I'd be perfectly happy with that. So that's, I guess, what I'm targeting with these two. The other reason that I like Dubravka is because he's the cheapest keeper that you can go for on your free hit that doubles. You can go to the likes of Schmeichel. You could potentially go up to Ramsdale. You could potentially go to De Gea if you wanted to. I personally think that for 4.4 million with Dubravka, what you're getting is a good chance of a clean sheet and also a budget keeper in there. Now, I have Target in this draft above Shah and above Burn. The reason for that is Target's underlying data is better. So Target has better expected goals and expected assists than both Shah and Burn. So for me, if you can afford Target, he's probably the one to go for. That being said, Shah is obviously a bit of a monster in the box. He does take some free kicks as well, so he's a bit of a fun pick. So I don't see a massive issue. And for me, like I said, I've got exactly the money in the bank to afford this. If for some reason someone goes up in price and I haven't activated the free hit yet, the obvious place for me to downgrade in this team is probably to go from Target to Shah. So I don't mind either of those. Again, let me know down below which Newcastle defenders you're looking to target, if any, on your free hit. I do have Tellers in here. Now, yes, Manchester United are sat about 12th, 13th in the league this season for expected goals conceded per 90. I do not expect them to keep a clean sheet against Liverpool. And to be honest, they might not keep a clean sheet against Norwich. The reason I've got Tellers in there is he's actually got really good underlying data. So he's got a 0.18 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. That's starting to push towards the likes of Cancelo and Robertson. So yes, Manchester United haven't got the best defence, but Norwich is a good fixture, Norwich at home. And he's on a lot of corners. So in the absence of Shaw playing at left back, he's going to be on a lot of corners. Obviously, it looks like Shaw might need surgery on his leg, suffering from the injury that he suffered back in 2015 when he broke his leg. So Tellez should start both games. Tellez should be on corners and some free kicks as well. and he's got pretty good underlying data. So for me, I still think he's quite a high upside pick for the free hit. And if he can get a clean sheet and an attacking return from Norwich, the Liverpool game's just a bonus. So I have got him in most of my free hit drafts. I understand if you don't trust Manchester United defensively or offensively, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to. I think some other good options in there is I quite like Justin. I think Justin could be a good option. You could even go for a double up or triple up on the Newcastle defence if you want a Dan Burn or a Shah in there instead. You could potentially just go for another Manchester City defender, someone like a Laporte in there. Manchester City have an incredibly high chance for a clean sheet against Brighton at home. So there are multiple other options you could go in there. I really do like Tellers still. And then I have got Cancelo in there. I'm not a massive fan of picking lots of single game week players, but Cancelo's underlying data is so good. City is so good defensively. There's a recent quote that's come out from Pep Guardiola that says Manchester City have to win the remaining 7 games. I would be shocked if Cancelo doesn't start at least 6 out of those 7. And to be honest, I think he'll start all 7. He started pretty much every game this season. He doesn't look at all fatigued. He continues to improve. So I don't see another player that has a double game week for me that I think has a good chance of outscoring Cancelo, in my personal opinion. The obvious absence from this defence is Trent. I actually don't have any Liverpool players in this team apart from, as you can see, Tsimikas third sub. That's not to say that I don't think Liverpool will beat Manchester United, and it's not to say that I don't think Liverpool keep a clean sheet. What it is to say is that if I'm going to pick single game week players, I prefer the Spurs and City players as opposed to the Liverpool players, especially when you're looking at about 8.5 million for Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think Cancelo's better value, and then I can't really get to Trent without downgrading another double game week player. So for me, this is the best balance I can find. I've then got a Marty as my 4th defender. I don't expect a Marty to play both games, but I do expect him to probably start at least one of them. And then Tsimikas is my 3rd sub. But to be honest, I'd be surprised if Target Tellers and Cancelo don't feature in some form. So that's my defense. Currently 3 at the back. I'm very, very happy with it. For most free hit drafts that I've put together, these 3 defenders and Dubravka in goal have been there for the majority. Maybe changing target for Shah. Happy with that. Let's move on to the midfield. So moving on to the midfield, I think you've got the best balance you can here. When you look at the strikers that I've got, when you think about trying to squeeze in Cancelo and also having an okay option on the bench. I'll start with Martinelli because this is the place I didn't really want to downgrade. I still think Saka's the one to go for if you can. I think he's more nailed on for minutes. He'll start both Southampton and Chelsea, whereas I think Martinelli could see the bench in one of them. I think if he is to be benched in one, it probably would be the Chelsea game. Smith Rowe is sometimes favoured in those bigger games, but to be honest, he could quite easily start both. If Ødegaard continues to start in the pivot with Xhaka at left back, I think Martinelli has to start. The issue that I think you might find on a free hit if you pick Martinelli or Smith Rowe is that Arsenal really lost that midfield battle against Brighton when Ødegaard was in the pivot and Xhaka was at left back. I'm not saying Xhaka's a fantastic player, but I do think it makes more sense to try and get Xhaka in that midfield for Arsenal. So I think there's a potential that we could see either Martinelli drop into left back, which we saw temporarily against Brighton, or Saka pull into left back. But either way, I've got a feeling that Martinelli might miss one of these 2 games. The issue is that if I want all of the other players, specifically Son in midfield, is the sacrifice I have to make. I have to make the sacrifice to drop Saka to Martinelli. I don't think it's a terrible downgrade. And if you look at the underlying statistics for the 2, as we did on last night's stream, I actually think that Martinelli's a very decent option if he plays. So Martinelli's in there as a bit of a sacrifice. You've got Dewsbury Hall on the bench if you want to, though. So if you want to put KDH in there instead of Martinelli, that's absolutely fine. You can make Martinelli your first sub, put KDH in. He obviously scored and got an assist in game week 32, so he could be a decent option. Then I've got Son. Now, Son wasn't going to be in my free hit draft, but I think it's difficult to ignore him at the moment. I don't think I'm responding to pass points. What I would say is that Son's underlying data is good, not great. It's actually similar to that of Fernandes. It's similar to that of KDB, Kane, Salah. Son's underlying data doesn't suggest that he should have scored 48 points in 3 game weeks, as he has. But he is an excellent finisher. His confidence is clearly high. And Brighton defensively haven't been that great recently, hence why I've also got Cancelo in there for potential attacking returns. So I think it would potentially be unwise to go without Son at the moment. If you're on a free hit, you have whatever, you can make unlimited transfers. It seems like a strange decision to be going for a double game week player with poor underlying statistics and betting against Son at the moment. So Son has been in most of my drafts at the moment. It does mean, like I say, that I have to make a few downgrades elsewhere. I think I'm happy to do that for now. I've actually got Barnes in here at the moment. Now, there's 2 reasons for this. The first reason is I can't afford Maddison. Like I said, I'm £0.3 million short, so I can't quite afford Maddison. The second reason here is that I actually think that Barnes, depending what goes on with the PSV fixture, number one, how many minutes do they play? Is it 90 minutes? Is it 120? How many minutes do Barnes and Maddison play individually? And also, do they get knocked out? I think all of that will affect how many minutes we expect our players to get. But I actually think that due to the fact that he was rested in game week 32, I think Barnes has got a very decent chance, depending on the PSV fixture, of playing both in game week 33. Whereas Maddison has started a few games on the bounce, and he's playing like 90 minutes in a lot of these games. So I actually think at the moment, without seeing what happens in the PSV game, I think Barnes is slightly more likely to get both games, whereas Maddison is maybe likely to get rested in one of the two. Very much depends on the Europa Conference League game, but for now I've got Barnes in there. Both got very similar underlying data. If they're both going to play Newcastle and Everton, I do prefer Maddison. I think he's got more routes to points. His underlying data is slightly better. I just think he looks like the player to own at the moment. But for now, we've got Barnes in there. It could be both. If you do want to go for both, you have to make downgrades elsewhere, whether that be downgrading Cancelo to a cheaper double game week defender, whether that be downgrading Son to Barnes. But for me, this is the best balance that I can find. And then, like I said, this is my sensible team that I'm building here. This is the team which the algorithms would like, which makes sense on paper. Fernandes, in my opinion, is probably the best captaincy shout in game week 33. I think if Ronaldo starts both games, he's probably projected to get slightly more points. But the issue they've got with Ronaldo is, number one, after the Norwich fixture, Manchester United play both Liverpool and Arsenal in the space of 4 or 5 days. The Norwich, Liverpool and Arsenal fixtures together are in the space of 7 days. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Ronaldo maybe rested in one of them. And as a result, I think and also, sorry, I should say that incident with the kid filming Ronaldo slapping the phone, is he going to be punished for that? Is there going to be a formal punishment? Probably not, because there's probably limited evidence. We've seen the video, but you can't prove that he did that. I'm not saying that he shouldn't receive formal punishment, but I doubt there will be. Will Manchester United potentially bench him against Norwich to rest him for Liverpool and Arsenal, and also just to take him out of the spotlight? I don't know. Maybe I'm hypothesizing. Maybe I'm building a narrative that isn't there. But for all of those reasons, I'd feel slightly uncomfortable captaining Ronaldo when he could be benched against Norwich to then basically captain him against Liverpool. So for me, I'd probably stick the armband on Fernandes as the slightly more safe, sensible decision with respect to expected minutes. So that's the midfield. Like I said, KDH on the bench as well as a cheaper option. I'm very happy with it. I'd like to get Maddison in there as well. I'd like to upgrade Martinelli to Saka. But when you consider I've got Cancelo, Telles, Target, and when you look at the strike force that I've got and making sure that you've got decent bench option, that's the best midfield I can build. So without further ado, let's look at the 3 strikers. So guys, it is a fairly, not obvious forward line, but I think a lot of people will be on a very similar forward line for their free hit. I'm going to go through each of the players. I know straight away people are going to look at this draft and say, this is why I don't want a free hit. You've got triple Manchester United. Manchester United are rubbish this season. They're not motivated. They're on the beach. They're not playing for Rangnick. They looked really poor against Everton. I understand all of that. But the other side of the coin is, when you look at the underlying data for Fernandes and Ronaldo over the season and in recent weeks, they are continuing to suggest that they can score goals and they will score goals. They're both potentially on penalties. Like if you have both of them, you're going to get penalties for Manchester United there. And Norwich is still a good fixture. Yes, Norwich beat Burnley. And yes, Everton beat Manchester United in game week 32. But you can't always use past results to predict the future. At some point, you have to try and anticipate when points are going to come. I used the example on the live stream. If you brought Son and Kane in game week sort of 25, 26, when there wasn't much of a suggestion that either of them were informed that Tottenham were going to win convincingly in any game, you would be absolutely laughing right now. Now, I'm not saying that Fernandes and Ronaldo are going to do what Son and Kane are going to do. I'm not for a second suggesting that I think Manchester United are in the form that Tottenham are in. But what I am saying is sometimes you have to try and predict when a team are going to perform. And I hope, expect that potentially Fernandes and Ronaldo can get a couple of returns against Norwich. And then, like I said again on the stream last night, you don't need Manchester United to beat Liverpool. Liverpool could smack Manchester United 6 or 7-1. I would probably regret not having Salah at that rate. If Ronaldo and Fernandes combine to get 1 goal against Liverpool, that's enough. You don't need Manchester United to play well. What you need is 1 return. Fernandes goes down in the box. Ronaldo scores the penalty. You're laughing. So I still think that the sensible decision is probably to have both of these on a free hit. At the very least, you have 1. And for me, the Everton game alone isn't enough to say now, I don't want to free hit. If you were considering free hitting and having Manchester United players in your team, I don't necessarily think you should let 1 fixture impact your decision-making too much. If you weren't free hitting anyway because you thought Manchester United were rubbish, that's fair enough. That's a decision that you've held for a while now. But I wouldn't let that influence you too much. So for me, I have still got Ronaldo in here. Like I said, for the reasons I listed though, I understand if you don't want him. I understand if you just want Fernandes, because maybe his minutes aren't confirmed. There could be punishment for that incident after the game against Everton. And equally, he doesn't really pass the eye test at the moment. So again, fully understand. I think if you're only going to go for 1, I would go for Fernandes. And I still think Telles is a good option. We'll discuss in the second draft if you want to maybe go for Sanchez instead of Ronaldo. So this is the current forward three. Like I said, I've got Ronaldo in there. I also have Kane, so I've got the Son and Kane double up. Similarly to Son, I just don't think there are many strikers that I would expect to match Kane at the moment, regardless of how many fixtures he has. And I think one of the potential benefits of a free hit at the moment is that you can double up on Son and Kane. So I think that's a pretty big differential. Some of you might already own Son and Kane. Let me know down below if you do. But I think for a lot of people, you can only own one. And therefore, one of the potential benefits of the free hit, like I said this week, is to get both, especially with a decent fixture against Brighton at home. And then the third and final striker, I've actually got St. Maximin. Now, I did discuss this on the Fantasy Football Fix channel, so if you haven't yet watched that video, it did go live this morning, so go over to the Fantasy Football Fix channel. I look at Telles versus Target, I look at St. Maximin versus Chris Wood. They've got similar-ish underlying statistics, but St. Maximin actually comes out on top on pretty much every major underlying statistic, apart from big chances per 90, and Chris Wood also comes out on top because he has penalties. But outside of that, St. Maximin's actually showing more open play goal threat, and more open play assist threat as well. So if you expect Newcastle to get a penalty, then I would say Chris Wood is the player to go for. If you're predicting that they maybe won't get a penalty in those two fixtures, I actually think St. Max is the one to go for personally. Now, I think you could potentially go for the double up. Again, if you don't go for Ronaldo and you stick with the front three, you could have St. Maximin, Kane and Wood. I think that's absolutely fine. And like I said, Leicester could be pretty fatigued after that PSV fixture. So I don't actually mind a double up on the Newcastle attack. What I would say is when you look at the defensive and offensive data for Newcastle recently, they're defending very well. They're attacking fairly mediocrely. They're not a particularly exceptional attack, even since Eddie Howe has started to improve them. So I personally think a double up in defense and a single attacker makes the most sense. I just think St. Maximin's a very exciting pick. But what we did see in Game Week 32, the likes of Chris Wood, Pukki, Zaha, all getting penalties. Penalties do matter. And if you can pick a penalty taker in your team, if it's a 50-50 decision for you, if you're like, I'm really not sure St. Max or Wood, I'm really struggling, probably pick Wood because you do have penalties there and penalties do happen. And as we've seen with Ivan Toney recently, when he scored those 5 goals in 2 game weeks, did he get 3 penalties, I think it was? Penalties do make a difference. And if, like I said, if it's a sort of 50-50 decision for you, I don't mind picking a player that's on penalties. So putting that all together, this is the sort of, like I said, sensible, logical free hit draft. Let me just recap. You're covering the Manchester City clean sheet, which I think is very likely against Brighton. Cancelo's also just a fantastic player. Double Newcastle defence. I think they're probably the best defence to target for this double game week. I'm not expecting necessarily a clean sheet against Leicester, but the Palace one's definitely on there. And if Leicester do rotate, a clean sheet against Leicester isn't off the table. And Target, again, is showing some pretty good attacking data. 0.13 non-penalty expected goal involvement. So he's a good option there. Telles, pretty good from an attacking perspective. Hopefully gets a clean sheet against Norwich. Then the midfield is all about trying to get Son, Fernandes and a Leicester midfielder in there, which does mean that you need to downgrade Saka to Martinelli if you've got a similar budget to myself. And the front three of St. Max, Kane and Ronaldo, I think you're covering the 3 major attackers there. Like I said, you can go for St. Max or Wood. And then I really like having KDH first sub there if any of these players do miss out. I really like this draft. I probably will end up on something similar to this if I do end up free hitting. But what I thought I'd do is just show you a slightly different, it's not massively different, a slightly different second draft, which involves actually dropping Ronaldo and seeing what we can do if we do drop Ronaldo out of the team. So here is the alternative free hit draft. I'm not going to go through each position individually. What I'm going to do is just, as you can see on your screen, present the entire team and talk about where the key differences are. So Dubravka and Telles still in there. Shah is now in there instead of Target. That's purely due to budgetary constraints. Like I said, I think I do prefer Target, although they are fairly close. I'm actually £0.2 million short of this team, so I can't quite afford this team, and therefore I had to make all the downgrades I could. There are other downgrades you can make. You could go Telles to Dallo. You could potentially downgrade one of your defenders on the... So Marty could go all the way down to the cheapest possible other defender to fund this team. There are other places. St. Max could go down to Wood. So there are other places, but for me, Target to Shah had to happen to at least get close to affording this team. And then the clear place in defence that I've had to downgrade is actually Cedric instead of Cancelo. That is a huge downgrade, but you do get an extra fixture in there and you do cover the Arsenal clean sheet. You'll see in a minute why I've made that downgrade, but that budget does allow you to do other things with your midfield. So Cedric comes in. That could be Ben White if you think he's more likely to start both games. I think Cedric should be fine. And of course, Cedric is slightly cheaper too. If you don't want to go for St. Max in attack, you could go for like a Dan Burn where Cedric is, and you could go for BRUYNE instead of St. Maximin. So I haven't really spoken about any Southampton players here. The reason is they've got one tricky fixture in against Arsenal. The Burnley fixture's all right. They just don't look very good at the moment, and none of their players really sort of appeal to me. But you could go for BRUYNE instead of St. Max. That would allow you to upgrade Cedric potentially. So there are some other options in there. The midfield is where this team really comes into its own and why I love this draft so much. So the three midfielders that stay the same from the previous draft are Barnes, Fernandes, and Son. So those three stay in there. But what you can actually see is rather than getting Martinelli and KDH, so upgrading Martinelli and KDH to De Bruyne and Sancho, that's a huge upgrade there. The key places that it means that you've lost players is it means you've lost Cancelo and it means you've lost Ronaldo. To fund Ronaldo, to using those funds, sorry, that you've lost Ronaldo and Cancelo with, you then can get De Bruyne and Sancho. So what this team essentially does boil down to, in your starting 11 at least, is Cancelo and Ronaldo versus De Bruyne and Sancho. It's a really tricky one, right? If you expect De Bruyne to start, I think he could easily match Cancelo. That being said, I think a clean sheet's definitely there for City. So De Bruyne's going to need to get at least probably 1 or 2 attacking returns there. So then it basically comes down to De Bruyne. So it comes down to Sancho versus Ronaldo. It is a very, very tricky one, to be honest. Obviously, it also requires a couple of other downgrades. Shah obviously comes in instead of Target, and you might need to make another downgrade elsewhere. The teams outside of that are fairly similar. I do really want De Bruyne at the moment. This is the main issue that I'm facing. I desperately want De Bruyne in my team. I think he's 100% worth having. But I do think that Ronaldo is a sensible decision on a free hit all the same. I guess it largely comes down to if you don't expect Ronaldo to start both, this could actually be the draft to go for. The other option that you've got outside of doing it like this is you could downgrade Sancho to a KDH and then have Cancelo in there. So you would have Dubravka, Shah, Telles, Cedric, Cancelo, De Bruyne, Barnes, Fernandes, Son, Kane, St. Max. So like I said, you could also put KDH in there instead of Cedric, I guess. So you could get a similar team, but then have Cancelo in there instead of Sancho. I don't mind that at all. But at that stage, you're getting to a point where you're free hitting with 4 single game week players in there. Listen, they are 4 excellent players, but at the same time, I wonder if that's maybe too many single game week players. And at some point, you need to take some risk with the double game week players. And I do quite like Sancho with a double. I like Ronaldo with a double as well. The other thing to note is that we're heavily reliant on Brighton continuing to be a bit rubbish, but their data's not as bad as maybe it suggests. Defensively, they have dropped off a little bit recently, but across the season, they're still about the 6th or 7th best defense in the league. From an attacking perspective, they've never been great, but you can see here I've got 3 attackers against Brighton here. They are all home fixtures, and Brighton don't have a massive amount to play for. So I'm not necessarily against that, but I would say just be careful with really loading up against Brighton, assuming that they're going to be pretty terrible. So this is the second draft. Do let me know down below which draft you prefer. Like I said, I guess it does boil down to Cancelo and Ronaldo versus De Bruyne and Sancho, but it is a little bit more than that. I can't quite afford this. I've had to do target to Shah. Obviously, Cedric then comes into the starting 11 for your teams. So it's a little bit more than just as being as obvious as that. Like I said, I guess it's Cedric versus Martinelli as well in your starting 11. I should have made that point apparent. And then a couple of other downgrades. But I actually do really like this second draft, and I am slightly tempted by it. The key thing that's tempting me is De Bruyne, but I really don't want to lose Cancelo. So do let me know down below which you prefer. Also, let me know down below if I've missed out any key players that you're potentially considering on your free hit drafts. I'm sure there are multiple players that you guys are considering. I think Ward-Prowse, Broja, potentially Kyle Walker-Peters are going to be players that people are asking why I haven't got. I just think there are potentially some slightly better options than Southampton this week, but they could start to perform quite well. That Burnley fixture is quite nice, so it might be that you want to go for some Saints players. Let me know your free hit drafts down below. So guys, before we end today's video, I just want to give a massive shout out to the Raptor Hall of Fame, the legends that continue to support this YouTube channel through thick and thin throughout the entire season. I massively appreciate it. If you do want personalized feedback on your team, if you've ever wanted to sort of DM me your team and get personalized feedback, if you want to chat with loads of other really top managers, we have multiple top managers in the top 10K in our private Discord chat. We also have a Raptor mini league as well. If you want any of those perks, you can become a Raptor 1 premium member. You can do that through the membership feature on YouTube, which is in the link in the description, and you can also do it through Patreon. It's exactly the same. It's just 2 different sites. For some different countries, you can't do it through YouTube. You can only do it through Patreon. So I've got both options available for you there. So if you want all of that stuff, all of those perks, you can do so. You're supporting the channel and you're also getting some stuff in return. Outside of that, if you want it for a very cheap price, it's 99p a month. You can become a Raptor 2 supporter. Essentially, by doing that, you get a badge next to your name, you get priority replying comments and live streams, and you also get to support the channel too. And of course, these member shout outs as well. So if you want to support the channel, please do. Those 2 options are available there. Content will continue to be free. As always, want to give a massive shout out to the Raptor Hall of Fame. You've kept me company throughout the season, and you've definitely inspired me to continue creating content. So thank you very much for your support this season. So guys, there you have it. Those are 2 free hit drafts, fairly similar for both of them. There are some commonalities between the two of players that I would definitely have on a free hit, but there are some slight differences as well. I guess it comes down to how much do I want De Bruyne? Do I want Cancelo? Is Ronaldo worth having? All of these questions, do let me know your answers to them down below. And if you are enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. As I always say, those 3 things are completely free for you to do, but they massively help support the channel. If you want to go above and beyond supporting the channel, download, or I should say join Ultimate Champions for free. Link in the description. It is a really cool game, and it does support me, and it means that they're more likely to sponsor me for future videos as well. And beyond that, you can, of course, become a member of the channel or join the Patreon. Both of the links to those are in the description as well. Until next time, guys, which will be the Game Week preview video. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.